Welcome to the Entrepreneurial CEO Podcast, where we dive into the real stories behind building and scaling a business. Each episode, we sit down with CEOs, founders, and leaders to uncover hard-won lessons in leadership, systems, and team building. Listen in each week to learn directly from real business leaders who have been in your shoes, had success, made the mistakes, and all of the messiness that comes with building a business. If you're ready to learn from real-world leaders and gain insights you can apply today, you're in the right place. So let's get started. Hey, everyone. Today's guest is Ken Goodrich. Ken is one of the most respected names in the home service industry. Many of you likely know who he is. Ken's best known for building Goettl into a national powerhouse, and along the way earned a reputation for scaling companies with accountability, precision, and relentless focus on results. He's also a longtime MAP client, partner, and advocate, someone who's taken the MAP system and truly embedded it into how he runs businesses. Ken's now leading a new venture called Kenarator and continuing to shape the future of the trade business. So Ken, honored to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us and excited to chat.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate you guys having me on, and certainly always like to support the team of MAP based on all the good stuff they've done for me over the decades.
You've been amazing friends of the business. So before I have a million questions, or we have a million questions for you. Before we jump in, maybe just tell the audience if you want to add anything to what I said or what you're doing now, a little bit about Kenarator.
Well, I'll just let me just give you a quick background on kind of where I came from, give some color to this whole conversation, which is, I probably started like most people on this, watching this podcast or listening to the podcast, which is, I knew a trade. I knew I had a skill, and I decided to go out. I was going to sell that skill and create a business. And so, I quickly went out in my mid-20s, and I started an air conditioning business and actually bought my family's business, which was me in a van. And I started to work and build my company. And as the majority of us experience, we figure out pretty quickly that we have no idea how to run a business. We have a lot of, we have some trade knowledge, and we can go out and make a few bucks to live on, but we can't really run a business. And so I hit that wall fairly early on, maybe a year and a half into it, when I showed up one day and the IRS was there and asked me why I was paying payroll taxes. And my answer was, what's payroll taxes? Because I didn't even know. So I just get started in business. And one thing leads to another through struggle. I get a hold of some books, mainly the E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And I pour myself into the book. And this is kind of before the internet, so I didn't have really access to the tools that people have today. And I got the E-Myth book, and it resonated with me. As a matter of fact, as I read it, I started thinking, this guy must have been following me around or something, because he knew exactly every stupid thing that I'm doing. And I got the book, and I poured myself into it. I poured my team into it, and we just started to document process, train process, and build a business. And over that period of time, I was able to, take care of the IRS, get my books in order, and start to have a real business. And I started to, and I pulled the company out of trouble, and I started to cash flow very well. So then I started buying broken businesses because, I had broke mine so bad, and I pulled it out of the hell, that I'm like, well, this is easy for me, and the broken businesses are cheap or no cost to me. And so that I started a career of that. So it's buy broken HVAC, plumbing, electrical service companies, and I would put them back together and have them start cash flowing. And got into all kinds of crazy stuff, like, searching the business bankruptcies, and going in and petitioning to be the white knight, and having the judges give me companies that were failing and things like that. So, I just started this whole routine in my late 20s, early 30s, where I was picking up these broken and bad businesses and using the whole system that I had created through the E-Myth to make them right, and started growing them. And then I started merging them together. And after I got some scale, some guys came to me and said, "Hey, we're going to do a roll up." This is the mid '90s. We're going to do a roll up. We're going to go public, and we're going to roll up the HVAC space, and we'd like you to be involved. So I said, okay. So a group of us got together, in my early 30s, and we rolled up and created $1 billion business, across the U.S. And then my career ever since has just been kind of that same routine where I'm buying and selling companies, I'm fixing companies, I'm really I'm a build to sell contractor. So I've done 6 transactions so far in my career selling businesses. My last one was in December of 2021 where I sold Goettl, or the majority interest in Goettl. And now we're off into a new venture where we're rolling up the standby generator space. So we started about a year ago January, and I started buying some broken companies, struggling companies in the space. And so the first year we got 3 locations, Dallas, Houston, and Tampa. And, we came in with our team, we have our process, started integrating them. We signed up for MAP immediately, got our MAP facilitator, started having our vital factors meetings, identify our vital factors, created a 1-page plan, started to go through the routines. And I'm happy to say our first year, we finished about $30 million in revenue in 3 locations. Got 2 locations in process right now to acquire. And, our goal is to build a meaningful 9-figure business surrounding the Gulf of America. That's what we're working on.
And that's where the Kenarator business has to be, because that's where you have, is it because of hurricanes and so on and so forth, where you need to have natural disasters that you need to have the generators?
Yeah, we're starting there. I mean, that's where the demand is. But, we started also kind of poking around. What I see in the whole generator business is it's going to be the battery business one day. And so the batteries are still kind of like, newer computers where, they're too expensive and don't do a lot yet, to be practical. But they'll come down, and battery backup will be a real thing for every home. And so I started with the storm region, just to kind of get into the whole power game. But we will evolve the company eventually to be more of a battery, and then go into the, I think backup battery systems are going to be a mainstay in every home, in the next years to come. So that way we can kind of service all of US when we get to that place. Right now, our thesis is we're getting into power through the generators. We're going to start adding the battery backup systems with them, and we're doing that currently now. And then we're going to evolve and do a battery business on the non-storm regions.
Yeah, I just dealt with that at my house. Our battery is a Tesla battery supported by solar, but everything went out. The whole city went out for like a day of power, and I was like, I didn't even know.
Oh, because it was running, huh?
Because the battery was running. It was solar, it was powered, and it was up and running. And at that moment, I realized this is an interesting business. And how you bring that up, that's cool.
Yeah, and then
I like your vision.
And then to that point, another thing we're working on is with all these solar companies. Probably shouldn't broadcast this, but I'm gonna. With all these solar companies that are going under, right? These solar installers. There's no real service companies for solar businesses. So, one of our departments that we're working on building now is, buying the data of all these defunct solar companies and going after those customers for maintenance contracts for the solar systems. Because who would you call if yours broke?
Some guy that sold it to me and doesn't probably want to return my phone call.
Yeah,
after I paid him $60,000.
Yeah. So that's where we're headed with the thing. We're going to be, we're leaning into the whole modern energy space.
That's an interesting time. I didn't see that one coming. I like it though.
Yeah.
Solar service, that's a good idea. Ken, if you don't mind, I'd like to go back and ask questions about when you first acquired Goettl and, it was somewhat of a turnaround, what were some of the big pain points that you had to solve internally to get it scaling and growing to the point where you ended up selling it?
Well, interesting enough, so I was the president of a national company that owned Goettl at the time, and Goettl and the Arizona businesses were having some legal troubles out there with the parent company. So I made a deal with it, and I bought the Tucson and Goettl in Phoenix. And when I bought it, it was doing 11 million in sales and losing 3 million a year. And so, but I had to buy Goettl because when I was a kid, I tell the story. I was holding the flashlight for my dad when I was 10 years old. The first air conditioner I ever lit up with a flashlight was a Goettl air conditioner because they used to be the manufacturer. They actually invented the residential air conditioner. And then my dad became a Goettl dealer. So as a kid, we were working on installing and selling Goettls every single day as a kid and growing up. And so me coming back in and taking it back over was kind of, I felt like it was my destiny to save this brand who had been one so important to the HVAC world, but two, certainly to my family over all those years. So anyway, I bought Goettl. It was doing 11 million sales, losing $3 million. So the first thing we did is we went in and we had to get the org chart right. So when we bought the business, we took the team that we could afford based on the revenue, and then the other ones moved on. And then we started to drill into, okay, what are the pain points? What are the challenges? Before we joined MAP, we kind of knew our metrics or vital factors, what we were trying to look for. So we started to put some scoring methodology or metrics methodology in place to start counting everything, right? So let's see where we're at. The next thing I did is I made sure that we got a robust accounting team in there. The one thing I've learned is, I read this book years ago by Tom Monahan, Domino's Pizza.
Yeah.
And what he said that the reason why I named it Domino's was because he had 3 fail before it. So the fourth one is fallen like dominoes. That's how he came up with the name. And what he said was, too, that he figured out that he never made money until he hired 3 times more accountants than he needed. And so really what he was saying is you really have to have a high fidelity on your numbers. You got to be able to dig in, not only just standard financial statements, timely financial statements, but just daily digging into the numbers and making sure you're headed the right way. And so those things really resonated with me. And I think it probably comes from my mechanical background, the order of operation, how an air conditioning works. An air conditioner works is no different than the order of operation, how a business works, right? You apply power to it and all these things start happening. You have a result, a profit, right? Mm-hmm. And so it resonated with me. So I started that direction. I trimmed down the business. I started digging into the metrics. And then I figured out very quickly, I had a plan to scale this one. The last deal I did before that, I had scaled it to 7 locations. It was called Yes Air Conditioning Plumbing. It was based in Las Vegas, and I was in Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Tucson again. And so, and I sold that one. So I went out and said, okay, I want to scale this nationally. I want to take Goettl back to its rightful place because they invented the damn air conditioner, so they should be a nationwide brand. So that's what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to start position it that way. And we created our mission statement, which was Goettlize the nation. We went out and started working on that. So when I made that, threw down that gauntlet, I said, man, I better figure out how I'm going to be able to take some of my, trades guys and teach them the skills of supervision, management, and leadership skills, right? So I can build the company. Now, I had this other experience where this guy worked for me one time. His name's Colin. He still works for me today. Actually, he works in the Kenarator business. He's my COO for the Kenarator business. But I recruit Colin. By the way, like I said earlier, like I always build the core team. I personally go find the core team, and it's usually not from the business we're in, but I put the core team together, no different than Mike does. So I get Colin, right? So this was a former experience. And I said, okay, I recruited him from Canada. I said, listen, I need you to come out here to my Corona location. And, it hasn't done well and it's kind of stuck in the mud. I need you to get it unstuck. So meet me out here and I'm going to kind of give you an overview. So he comes out and I'm like, well, I think you're going to have to look for a new ops manager because this one is this and this. Your controller, seems like spends a lot of time out in the warehouse with a big thing of Circle K soda and a cigarette. And we're only getting one hand because she's always got something else. I just went through the list of people and I said, you might have to retool these people, right? He goes, okay, I got it. I'll see you in a month. So a month comes back, I come back and the business was doing well. Like looked like it was tightening up very fast, but it was all the same people. And I said, what are you going to look for the team member? He goes, yeah, I'm looking, but I'm seeing what I can do with these guys. I come back amazing. 3 months later. It's the top branch. He's my top performing branch with the same people, with the very same people that I would have thought probably were a bust. And so I said, how did you do that? And he goes, well, in my last business, I worked with this company called MAP, Management Action Programs. And we implemented this process whereby we had these routine meetings. I have my daily huddles. I got job description in place. I got our metrics in place. We have these vital factor meetings every month, and we do all this routine. And I just get them up to speed and get everybody interested and pull in the same direction. So that taught me a huge lesson. Like, wow, I got a lot to learn about management leadership here, and not everybody's a bust, and the turnover, how expensive with the expense of turnover and training, it just was the right thing. So anyway, I remembered that experience. I'm working on Goettl. I'm going to build this nationwide brand. I know I need to have some sort of resource to build my team. And by the way, maybe even touch me up some on my leadership skills because, I was just learned by showing up every day. And so I went and I took the first class, and what a huge eye-opener it was about understanding the role of the leader and understanding the role of management. And I could clearly see why Colin was so successful at leading people because he followed the system to a T, right? He didn't second guess it, he just did it. And I said, okay, well, this is my place. This is the place where I'm going to go develop my team, and we're all going to talk the same language. That was the most important part of it to me, right? So we had our jargon, our vital factors meetings and our all the other elements of MAP, but we were all doing it the same way. So I started I went through there and I put that MAP book, and it was on my desk every single day. And every day I'd get in, I'd make sure I looked at it a little bit to make sure it kept me on task because, I don't think people realize that the biggest part of education is practice. You need to practice it, right? So I would keep it down there until I really got it and I could start to use it as the effective tool it was. It took a while, but I kind of got the good routine about that. Then we got the facilitator. which is, I would suggest to anybody listening to this podcast, if you use the MAP process or system, you should get the facilitator and have them come in and lead your vital factor meetings. But we had a great facilitator, Steve Buchanan. How do you?
Buchanan. Yeah.
He was great to have on our team, and
Amazing person.
Yeah, and he just had such experience and wisdom. He really helped us out. But anyway, I got that process implemented, and we started using the MAP team to help train our people, and it was just regular part of our overhead. That was my management training program, and it worked great.
Yeah, let me ask you a question about Steve. You worked with Steve, and you mentioned he was super helpful. For somebody who maybe is thinking about doing it themselves, like, what would be the difference if you didn't use Steve versus you did? Like, how did Steve, the senior consultant, help you and the team?
Well, number one, he was a constant reinforcement to the MAP process, right? The 5 fundamentals. He knew it so well, and he could continually bring us back to the fundamentals and get us exercising the tools that you gave us, that you taught us, right? So that's number one. That's the most important to me, that we're all kind of operating the same playbook. Number two, he came with a lot of business wisdom. He ran a big region of Sparkletts water. And, you're dealing with guys delivering water and trucks and stuff. And it was all pretty similar to the kind of world that we run in. So he understood how to apply it better, and had some great management experience that he could share with us. Like, he had this situation, here's how he handled it. And he also kind of knew, how would I call this? He just taught us some good things, like great leaders are great actors, and, kind of the role that you're playing as a leader.
Yeah.
But I would say we never would have implemented it. We never would have stuck to it. We never would have implemented it had it not been for Steve or having the facilitator. So, the facilitator is the most important part as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I had the same experience, Ken. When we put it into the last company, Restaurants on the Run, with all those drivers running all over the place in all these cities, like, I would have never been able to implement it. It's not my style. Like, I want to think a little bigger. I want to do some different things, and I wouldn't have had the discipline to do it, or the comfort level to really call people out. Remember, that's my team and my job. Then I've got to be the good guy one day, and then the next day I'm the bad guy, holding them accountable for things. Bad guy's not the right word, but that for me, that was the challenge. That's why we brought in a coach too.
And just the routine. I mean, you think about it, just the routine that the MAP system is set up, whereby, you're celebrating your wins, you're identifying outliers, who did a great job that month. You start talking about various challenges. You get those documented, so you get them out on the table. Then you kind of go through last month's challenges and the fixes, and hold everybody accountable to make sure you get a nice high score on the fixes, and then go through your vital factors. And there's the routine about it all. It's I look at it kind of like the tortoise and the hare, right? So the entrepreneur, us guys, left without that discipline and that process, we're just bouncing off the walls. We got a new idea every day. Oh, here we're going to fix this by doing that, and turn the attention of the whole team that direction, as opposed to really methodically building the business. The one thing that I've been able to do, based on, because I've done so many transactions and I have the wherewithal, the team, and the experience now, when I'm approaching this Kenarator business, we created the exit plan first. Here's when it's going to get done. Here's what it's going to get looked at. Here's what the business is going to look like, all the stuff. And then we're filling in the annual plans to kind of get us to that direction. So by year,
is that the 1,000-day plan?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So year one, we got to be here to be on the mark, right?
I like that.
But most people just in business just show up and keep doing it, right? And
They're too busy working in it than on it, right? Yeah. That's super interesting. You started with that vision.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Mike, you mentioned 1,000-day plan. I want to, in 2018, after you sold Goettl to PE, private equity, you had a new challenge, which was selling it again in 1,000 days. And you had that 1,000-day plan or a 1,000-day playbook. What was in that playbook? And how did Matt play a role if it did? Can you talk to us about that?
So we used the one-page plan format, and just as I said, we created basically a 3-year plan.
Mm.
But what happened was I sold a chunk of the business in 2018 to a smaller group, and we knew that the play was, okay, get with a smaller group, get some more scale, tune up the operations, get the momentum going a little faster, and then we're going to sell to a bigger group and, get the proverbial big second bite of the apple, right? And so what I told the PE group before we closed, I said, listen, I like 3-year sprints. Sometimes it doesn't work, but I like 3-year sprints because, you can do anything for 3 years and, and not get tired and distracted and bored with it, right? So let's try to do a 3-year sprint. I'm going to call it the 1,000-day plan. And so it's something that's a battle cry to rally the team around. Okay. So then I brought each of my key team members in and I gave them equity grants, profits interest units. And I said, okay, here's where these are worth today. Here's where, if we hit our 1,000-day plan, here's what they will be worth. And the 1,000-day plan is we're going to 10x the value of the business in 1,000 days. And we're going to figure out how we're going to do that. Now, in the PE world, it's about, you got to grow the profitability. The multiples, I know the multiples were coming up, so that helped us some, but you also got to grow the profitability to a certain point. And show a track record of organic growth, for instance, to get the right proper multiple to achieve a 10x value. So we kind of backed into all that. We created 3 one-page plans, and we knew the kind of fundamentals where we needed to be for each year, and we would track it by quarter. And then back of the house, everyone would take their respective department and make their kind of a, operational plan on a Gantt chart. Like, okay, here's where the infrastructure needs to grow to over that time as well. So we knew in, 6 months, we needed to have these hires done, these hires done, these acquisitions done, this pace on the revenue, things like that. So we just we put the plan together. We stayed very disciplined with the MAP process, and I'm happy to report on day 996 we sold the business for $500 million, which was a 10x from the first transaction, and completed our 1,000-day plan.
That's incredible. Congrats. That's remarkable. What role did the senior consultant, was it still Steve Behunin at the time? Was he working with you during the 1,000-day plan?
Oh yeah.
And what role did Steve and Matt play?
We were so successful with Steve. I think we got the Matt President's Award for like 7 or 8 years straight.
You were a 7-time award winner, which is incredible.
Yeah.
Back to back. Yeah, that's incredible.
That's right. Back to back.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's how fast we were growing. That's how fast we were growing.
It was so funny. I flew to Vegas a couple of weeks ago and I watched, Rick Gutman. I always say the actor, Rick Gutman, who was one of your guys, and he's now at MAP, and he's thriving. And he bragged about that. He was working with a company in Vegas called PFC, Steve Krychek, a security company. And he was bragging in his introduction. He was like, yep, I was with Goettl, 7-time MAP award winner. It was pretty cool.
Yep.
Consecutive. Said that too.
Yeah, but here's a big part. Here's a big part of talking about the 1,000-day plan. We knew we needed a school. We needed a management school, and we needed we were certainly to facilitate to make sure that the MAP system was getting implemented throughout the whole organization down to the trucks. And then we needed a school to create technicians, because technicians are very difficult to find, and it's got to the place where you got to build your own. So he was very instrumental in the 1,000-day plan.
That's interesting. Yeah, I have found that I have a few clients that I work with, not many because I'm focused on the business, and every one of my clients has an internal champion that pushes MAP to every department in the organization. And so what then I can do is I can go into our technology stack that all of our clients run on, and I can review every Vital Factor team meeting. And like Ken, I can't tell you what it feels like when I go in and I'm watching 7 different Vital Factor team meetings run every month. Some of the people are in different countries, and it just kind of rolls all up. So it's really pretty slick. It's a good feeling but that's the key. You have that champion that can help push it out.
Yeah, I think it's helpful. More than one champion is better.
True.
You can, yeah.
Yeah, everyone on the executive team should be a champion because they all have to put it into their teams.
I think one of the most eye-opening situations that occurred is when we first started rolling out in Goettl, and Steve would come out, and a lot of the fix-up projects weren't getting done. You know what I mean by the fix-up projects? You're at the Vital Factor meeting, you identify things, and you assign people
exactly
for these fixes. And so he was scoring us and saying, he came to me and said, "Listen, we can keep spending your money if you want, but if the people aren't going to do it, then you're not accomplishing anything other than giving them a free lunch and a meeting." And so it required me to take a good hard look at some team members that actually didn't make it through the process because they just couldn't deliver the projects. And
makes sense.
I don't think they couldn't. I think they were to use a MAP term, they were onboard terrorists, and they were just kind of digging the sand out from under their feet because they didn't want to do the extra work, I guess.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of MAP. It kicks those people self-identify.
Yeah, they do. It's funny. That's a universal truth when I acquire companies. Usually when I acquire the companies, I always say, the rats jump off first. The rats jump off the ship first, right?
Yeah.
So you'll know who was not doing their job or potentially stealing pretty early on. But anyway, that process too helped us clean up our management team. So, we had some key roles. Like we had a key plumbing VP who, really knew the business well, but he just couldn't get his mind around, the improvement process.
Yeah.
Really when it came out, interesting enough. So we had to part ways with him, and we got a better guy that he wasn't as experienced, but because he embraced the MAP system, he did a lot better.
Yep.
That's an interesting data point. But this guy, the other guy came back to me one time, and he said that, he really regrets not leaning into it, but he was worried that he was going to create his own competition for his job.
Yeah. Don't you have I thought I heard you once talk about a saying, like turning, I don't know if it was something like this, turning ordinary MAP helps turn ordinary managers into extraordinary managers, or so. I thought you had said something like that before, but that's what when you were saying that, that's what I started thinking about. It's like not everybody can hire A+ players. So you can take your people and turn them into A players with the system.
Well, it's just like the story I told you about with Colin, right? Like what he created, what he created with that entire team.
Same people.
He created our best players.
Yeah.
Because look, they had a system to follow. They knew there's nothing more frustrating than doing a job that you don't know how to do, I would imagine. And so that's something that's really lacking in the trades, certainly in the trades that I'm in, this HVAC, plumbing, and electrical service business. Like, there is no management. You can't hire anybody. There's very few people out there that have had management roles because they're all mom and pop businesses.
Mm.
And then even the ones who've had management roles, they've managed a system. So let's say they've managed a Nexstar system or a Certain Pass system or a service excellence system. These are these best practice groups, right? Let's say they manage it, but it's not translatable because they don't understand the theory behind it. They don't understand the art of managing people. They just understand how to manage that business system. And they can't translate well into a new business that doesn't have that system.
Right.
So
yeah,
I'm telling you, and I think most of the industry is kind of giving me these props, but the guys that I've created over the years in HVAC and plumbing in terms of leadership through the MAP program are the most desirable guys in the entire industry. They're the highest performers and the most desirable guys in the whole industry for leadership roles.
Because they can produce.
It's unbelievable.
Right? They have the right skills,
It's the combination
the right training. Yeah.
You train them in the fundamentals, okay? Then you give them a system that takes the training they had in the fundamentals of management and accelerates their performance into high-performing leaders because they have that system. I love the way you say that. That's the beauty of MAP. You put those two things together, and boom, you get these leaders that 10 years later are still in demand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know what? I've been preaching this lately, maybe the last, 5-7 years, and it goes like this. Everyone asks me, they come out and reach out to me and ask me questions on how do I market, how do I do this, or I'm just starting my business. What should I do? And I always say, you should go get your job back from your last guy, number one. Then you should join this best practice group and study it until you know the math behind the business, until you know the metrics behind the business, until you know how the structure works, until you know how org chart works, what is job descriptions for, how to get that, until you get the fundamental processes from a best practice group. Then you got to go to MAP, and then you got to understand how to be a supervisor, a manager, and a leader, and you got to get that routine down, and you have to get that built first. Once you understand the math of the business, you understand and have the fundamental processes of the business, and now you know how to manage and lead people. Now you go into business and start working. But to go in like I did and every other knucklehead like me, where we just say, well, I can fix an air conditioner and look at my beautiful van wrap with my little character on the side of my truck, look how good it looks, and go to work. That's not going to get it. And, very few guys have followed my suggestion, but a few have. And those are the guys that in year two, they'll do $3 million their first year profitably and have P&Ls and have a team building and,
Yeah, do it the right way. Follow all the fundamentals that you need to follow because it's not
complex. Well, that's one thing in homes. Sorry, I'm talking a lot, but let me say this one thing.
No, you're good.
One thing about home services, especially HVAC and plumbing electrical, because there's such big industries, is they have these best practice groups that you can get in. You literally can come in, get all the fundamental processes in your hands. You can study them, you can get trained on them, you can make them yours, put your name on them, you can put them in your training system or whatever you want. Now it's better than a franchise. You have very detailed information on how to run that business. Then you go get some training on how to manage people and such. You go get through the MAP process. You get that routine going. You put a couple other the fundamental building blocks. Then you start business.
Yeah.
I think not a lot of people have the patience for that, to slow down, right? It's like, we talk about we've talked on other episodes where people don't want to slow down to go to the workshop because that means they have to step away from the business. But if you do, it'll accelerate. So it's like slowing down to speed up. And I think that's kind of what you're saying too. Slow down to learn it, and then you jump in.
Yeah, well, look, I don't know anybody who's ever got it figured out to the place where they can really make a real profit and have a business who just did it cold.
Yeah.
Like we did. I don't know anybody that didn't struggle for at least 5 years, but really it's 10 years of hell. Like I'm saving you 10 years of hell. Give me 1 year of just, you being disciplined.
Yeah.
And I'll save you 10 years of fucking hell.
It's a good trade-off.
That's a good way to look at it. Like shorten your fucking curve by 10 years.
Yeah. But I'm right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, entrepreneurship is painful and hard, man.
I like I'm writing that one down.
I am fascinated by the 1,000-day plan. Just because, I mean, obviously I love having that rallying cry for the troops and something that everybody gets energized around, but also as an amazing result. Were there specific results from that period? Like, certain revenue growth or like operational improvements, like what, things that you guys changed or MAP helped you change that helped you to sell for that amazing multiple?
A lot of these companies that sold through this last, let's go 5-7 years to this HVAC roll up, they were just kind of mashed together businesses, right? But I didn't.
Right, they were
that, right? So I did. I went at completely different. I did a single brand because my mission was to Goettlize the nation, right? So I had a single brand. I wasn't running a whole bunch of different brands. I would convert every business we bought to a Goettl. We had central shared services where we really dug in and made it one cohesive business, not just a bunch of Joe's Plumbing and Sally's AC and all that stuff, right? And so we did that, and we had the infrastructure, which really got us. I knew that would pay. I knew that would get us extra multiples. And we drove probably the highest multiple ever paid in the whole industry because we had the infrastructure built. And I went out and I found this, she was our CFO at first. Her name was Kim Miramontes, and just a powerhouse, just a real powerhouse on organization, process development, leadership, management, things like that. Just a real top-rate powerhouse. And she embraced the MAP system and took the ball and ran with it. And she, to your point, Andrew, she streamlined, our shared service operation right through the branches and got everything really cohesive and right structurally, internally, so that we could grow. I can drive sales. My team, we can drive sales, we can do acquisitions, but until we had that core support team in place, we were always having hiccups. But she got it so streamlined that she got the integration team put together. She got the compliance team put together. She got the HR team really pumping and working for us. Really helped Rick put that school together, like those kind of functional things to allow us to grow.
That was a great question, Andrew. And I have a follow-up on that, but it's so funny because the playbook we used, Ken, when we were doing the Restaurants on the Run aggregation was very similar. We would buy the companies and we wanted to create a single brand. And so we had a process to convert everybody. Then we built shared services to support the whole company. So we had a cohesive unit with people development and so on and so forth. And that was the key. In fact, my only regret is that, when we sold it, we were trying to raise money. We had like a $25 million pipeline, but Grubhub made us that great offer. But man, I'm like, boy, what would have happened if we could have just kept buying those companies? It would have been so nice. But
it's always
the most fun doing that kind of roll up.
Yeah. sometimes I look back on it and think, had I kept some of these businesses, they over time, they probably would have been even bigger and better. But, I just like the challenge of fixing something somebody else couldn't,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have any during the follow up on you, AG, during your 1,000-day plan and the things that you did you have any moments of like, oh crap, shit, we're way off track. It's going to be a problem.
Not specifically, because these were really robust years in the economy and certainly in home services stuff. I mean, COVID was it was a double-edged sword, but it was so good for home services.
Mm.
What I was worried about more was, as a matter of fact, I told this to my PE guy partners at the time. In July, before we sold in December, I said, listen, man, you need to either get down here and let's start digging into this business some, or let's go ahead and start marketing this thing, because it's getting the flywheel's running so fast. Now it's starting to worry me about keeping up. I mean, it was doing so well and it was going so fast. At that point, we were starting to say, okay, the school's not keeping up getting texts, and we got more calls, and we're not getting to all the calls, things like that. So I guess that would be the one place where I saw, we were heading that way. But again, we had a team at that point and a process through MAP to identify it and solve it if that was the case.
It's a great problem to have. I bet a lot of people listening would love to have that problem.
I love listening. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Go ahead, Andrew.
Well, let's say we've got quite a few people, CEOs, leaders from home service companies that in the MAP community. Say a CEO is listening right now and wants to get to that level where their phone's ringing so much they can't keep up, but they're feeling stuck, and either they can't drive the accountability from the team or just not getting results. What's something you would say to that CEO or president?
Well, look, number one is, when I come in to fix a business, I'll take a good hard look at where we're at. What is the revenue flow? What is the job flow coming in? Without a lot of stress to the operation. Without like testing or throwing a bunch of money at marketing, and you could burn it and this or that. Like, what's a comfortable level? And then start to play with that music. Start to play there. You have to get everybody in the right cadence, and you have to have the machine working. You have to understand the metrics on how the whole thing works.
Right.
And you got to be cash flowing. Don't put yourself, I see a lot of guys talk about, and I'm guilty of this too. I used to talk about, well, I did 3 million this year and I'm going to do 5 million next year, right? With just making up a number. There wasn't a really plan to get there. And there's no rhyme, no reason why you'd want to get there. Obviously, ideally, you'd probably want to say, well, last year I made $300,000 on a $3 million. So this year I want to make at least $1 million on the bottom. If you start talking like that, you're going to have a better business. But anyway, I don't know where I was going with this.
That's okay. I'll bring you back. So I was just curious. Look, again, we've got a lot of business leaders in the MAP community, many in home services. A lot of them look to you for inspiration. You've had amazing success. If they're feeling stuck with their business, can't figure out how to get it rolling, what's one thing you would tell them?
Well, one, take a look at your operation and get the operation under control so it can cash flow. So you're not run around trying to put your whole finger in the dike every day, put out fires every day. Just get it to where it's a comfortable place where it's cash flowing, where you can spend time working on the business, not in the business. where you can spend time to backtrack and maybe get to the best practice group and start getting those fundamental processes. Any of these best practice groups, you want to know how to answer the phone? They give you a book with all the scripts. You want to know what the chart of accounts should look like? They go, here's the spreadsheet. You want to know what a sales system for air conditioner is? They'll go, here, do this. Go get that stuff and put it in place. Pare the business down so it's not eating your lunch every single day, and go get that material and start putting that in place.
So true.
Keeping things simple. Yeah.
That's it. Ken, we didn't know how to make money. Okay. And we'd show up at these best practice events, and get and talk to everybody. And one thing they did was they'd rip us. They'd be like, you guys are investing so much in training and development, so much in this management system you guys are putting in place and training everybody. And then they'd be like, let me show you how to make money. And they showed us some tweaks. And, between them ripping on us on training too much and then showing us how to make money, we ended up buying most of them over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool.
Because you guys could execute. You're the team.
Practice groups are what the biggest value. Like I said, you get all the material, but the biggest value is the community. It's all the other business people like yourself that have either struggling with the same thing or been there and done that. And here's where you can get the answers fast.
So huge. Just being able to tap people for help. We talked about that on another episode recently. The value of mentors, the value of the community, people that are willing to help and share their experience. It's so valuable.
Totally
I don't think it's a bad idea if you guys, kind of created the MAP community that way.
Mm-hmm.
These guys, they have one or two get-togethers a year, and they get meaningful speakers, and usually they have some lessons. Like they'll have 2 or 3 lessons that they're going to deliver to you, and sell some other training. But you get all these different business guys together and sharing ideas and helping each other succeed. That's a big value creator.
It's so funny you said that. I was just about to ask you. I was like, what do you think? Think we could do that? And I'm like, we've tossed that idea around, like have, whether it's like a forum where they get together quarterly, like a small group, or if it's maybe a bigger event twice a year, like you just said, and then maybe we have some speakers and we put them in small groups, do team consults and things like that. So I think we have to go in that direction. I think you're right, because it is the community.
I love that. I think that's so valuable. Having a digital and an in-person.
Ken, you're going to be our keynote at the first one.
Okay.
Consider that an invitation.
Yeah, I'm in. But look, you make sure that the meetings has some meat in it, not just rah,
right.
rah stuff. It's like, here's some really stuff you can take back and get implemented. And then you can have breakouts for some different sectors that you serve. I know home service or contracting is a big one for you.
Big one. Yeah. It's got to be educational. I mean, action's in our name, but I think that'd be
challenge. Your actions are middle name. We got to challenge them to get better.
Yeah.
And give them some new tools. I love that. Love it.
Ken, we've been going a long time, man. I feel like we could ask you a million questions. But thank you. One last question for you. So you've been building businesses, rebuilding businesses for a long time. Is there one lesson that you keep coming back to that you wish you had learned when you first started your career?
I'm just going to go back with the theme of this whole conversation is I wish that I would have had the sense or even the knowledge to go and understand that business isn't about the product and service that you're providing to the customers. It's not. Business is a set of processes that create your business system that delivers that service in the manner that you believe your customers want, and it creates the value proposition for the business, and it also creates a profit. So I wish I had known that. And, I guess lucky for me is I had my challenge pretty early on where I had to learn it. I was forced to by fire, to learn it through the IRS, but I learned it. But still, to get through to get through all of that, and to get to where I really had a meaningful business, it was 10 years. Now, that said, maybe it was 7. It was 7 years. It was 7 years. But that said, it was 7 years of me figuring out, and then I was able to exit into a bigger deal, and that kind of set my career going forward. So I think the one thing is slow down, go get the education you need. You don't have to go to college. You don't have to go to a university. Just slow down, go get to a best practice group in your industry, lean on the team at MAP, and make sure that you're prepared for the challenge of building your business system before you start. That's going to save you a lot of time and money, and certainly mitigate your risk for failure. Certainly going to give you the greatest chance of success.
Okay.
That's perfect.
That's great. Thank you. Well, thank you, man. Thank you, Ken, for spending your time with us. We really appreciate it. I think we have a lot of awesome content that we can share with the MAP community, and we appreciate it. So before we jump, where can folks go to connect with you, learn more about you, learn more about Kenarator?
Well, you can go to kengoodrich.com. I got a little website there, and you can purchase my co-authored book with Michael Gerber, which is the E-Myth HVAC contractor. Interesting story. I find this book when I'm struggling, and I carry it with me for 3 years, and read it over 30 times and implemented it, and use that one book to create everything I've created. And then I meet Michael Gerber like 22 years later.
Wow.
And he says, "Hey, why don't you co-author the HVAC book with me?" So, kind of full circle. And I did that.
That's pretty cool.
I'm just wrapping up the E-Myth plumber and the E-Myth electrician.
Ooh.
So I'll have those 2 out by the end of the year.
Oh, that's excellent. Nice. Yeah. We'll keep an eye out for those.
Hey, you know what? I'll ask this question right when we're on the podcast. I'm in the process of writing the book for MAP. Almost like the simple way to really implement MAP in your business, kind of everything we spoke about today. And I would love to feature you in one of the chapters, make you kind of the featured company. What do you think?
Yeah, look, the reason why I'm such a champion for MAP is because MAP has done so much for myself and my people. And so this is my means of giving back to both MAP and the industry. So anything that you guys need out of me, I'm there.
You're the best, vice versa.
We appreciate that, Ken. Thank you. Well, thank you again for your time. We appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And we will see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Ken, Andrew, good job.